My name is Kelli Dunlap. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology, and I am currently pursuing my PsyD, or my doctorate in clinical psychology as well. And my favorite video game is Halo. All of them.
Hi, I'm Dr. Sexton. I have a Ph.D. in social psych from the University up the road, UMass Amherst. Ph.D. in clinical psych from American University. Worked for a variety of places, NIH, NIMH, SAMHSA, CDC, National Census, FBI, so I'm the stats guy.
And what's your favorite video game? What's your favorite video game?
Oh, my favorite video game? Civilization.
Yeah.
And anything that has Star Wars on it, I'm satisfied.
Yay! So just in case you missed it, there are our names and our lovely degrees, and the title of the panel, just in case you forgot it already. So go see a neuropsychologist. That is not us. All right, so we're going to start off with some myth busting. So that's what we do when we do science, is we bust myths. So looking at this lovely bell-shaped curve here, and a nice standard deviation going on. So just kind of a polling of the audience. When you're looking at openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, which I will break down for you, start thinking about where you think the average gamer falls. Just wherever, you might think. So openness, it's openness to new experience, willing to try new things. Think about where do you guys think they fall? The red, the orange, or the yellow? Red, raise your hand. The low side. Anybody on the low side? On openness? Okay. What about orange? Anybody think they're right in the middle on orange? All right, well, other people. And on the gold side, they're more open than everybody else? Okay. Don't cheat. All right, conscientiousness, being aware of others' feelings, and how your behaviors and thoughts and words can impact how others may think, behave, and feel. Where do you think gamers fall? Red? Lower? Wow, you guys are pessimistic. Orange, right in the middle? And gold, better than everybody else on conscientiousness. All right, what about extroversion? I think that one's pretty much self-explanatory. Being extroverted, outgoing. Red? Okay. Orange? All right, and yellow. Wow, okay. More control there. And then agreeableness, again, pretty self-explanatory. How well you get along with others, being nice to others, being kind, not contradictory or confrontational. Red? Okay, you guys think that gamers are nasty. Orange, normal. Okay. And gold. They're just so super nice to everybody. All right, and the last one, neuroticism. Whoa. All right, so neuroticism being vulnerability to experiencing really intense emotions like anxiety and depression. So red would be, they're more vulnerable to it. They're more likely to get anxious or more likely to get clinically depressed. Okay, wow, pretty good number. In the middle, they're about normal, average. Okay, and then gold, they are superheroes and they feel no pain. Yeah, there we go. All right, so now remember, I'm using the honor system here, so remember what you said, and here are the actual results that we have found in our study. Look at all that, you guys are normal. That's right? Except for O, which is openness. So gamers do tend to be more open to new experiences than the normal or our norms would say. Which makes a lot of sense, because if you have to keep up to date with consoles and new games and new technology, you've got to be pretty willing to be open to new experiences. But everything else, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, you guys are all normal. And I think that's something we hear very often. We're told a lot of different things. If you guys saw the reel playing, all those media headlines, blaming gamers for a lot of things. So rest assured, you most likely are normal. And I can't say everybody. So there are three main topics that come up when we discuss mental health and video games. And the three most common are addiction. I think there was a panel on it. What is with the giggling? Are we identifying a little projection? A projection maybe? I don't know. So addiction, there was actually a panel on this yesterday. I think there's one after this panel tonight as well. So So we're not going to delve into addiction too much, but that's what you hear a lot about. Video games are addictive. They're taking our children, and it's just like gambling. It's just like alcohol. It's bad for you. Violence. This is a really serious one. Since Columbine up to the latest one in Connecticut, and if there's been another one since, I'm not quite sure. Kids are going crazy with violence. Video games are bad for you because they make you violent. There's a lot of stuff out there right now, especially in the media. So that's something that comes up a lot when we talk about mental health and video games. And see, I'm getting aggressive here. There we go, so video games. So stereotypes. There's a big problem with stereotypes in video games, whether it's super masculine and damsel in distress, or video games are just for children, which we know is not true, which we will get into. So there's a lot of stereotypes surrounding video games and the people who play them. So I'm going to address addiction first, and again, I know there's been other panels on it, so I'm going to go over really, really quick. One of the big studies was by Gentile in 2009, and he basically said 8% of the youth 18 to 8 years old are addicted to video games, just like you're addicted to alcohol or crack or something. And this is really bad, and it's only going to get worse throughout your lifetime. So these really awesome people in Australia did this study of adults, because we all know that there's a big cognitive difference between children and adults, and that's what this panel is focusing on, is adults. And what they did is they assessed for adults with problematic gaming habits. So they play too much, they neglect their work, they neglect their spouse or significant other, just things like that might happen with problematic gaming. And they got split into two groups. So two people who endorsed problematic gaming, which is that top dotted line, and people who did not endorse problematic gaming, which is that bottom line. And they tracked them over 18 months, so a longitudinal study, a long time. And what they found is that everybody experienced a decrease in problematic gaming symptoms. So even the worst, people who were reporting the worst symptoms got better over time. And they really didn't have an explanation for it. I mean, it could be maturity, that's almost 2 years. Maybe you've matured. What else has changed in your life? But it just kind of goes to show that just because you might have it, even if you have a gaming problem, the chances are very likely that it's going to decrease over time. You're not stuck with it, and it's not increasing, if nothing else. Which is a really good sign for those who emphasize video game addiction and its deadliness or whatever. So the violent video game debate, this one's really fun. So on one side you have Craig Anderson, and he has written a lot about, if you've read an article about violent video games make kids more violent, he probably either wrote it or had a hand in writing it. So he is like the violent video games are bad for you guy. And he's actually quoted as saying that video games are a public health threat for individuals from children, so like 8 years old, up to students college age, so in their 20s. So that's what he says, that's what his research indicates, and that's what he's putting out there. Now on the other side of the Mortal Kombat scene here is Christopher Ferguson. And if you've read anything that says video games are not necessarily bad for you, he's probably had a hand in writing it as well. And he's replicated a lot of Anderson studies and has found no correlation. And even when he does find correlations, he points out that correlations do not imply causation. Basically, just because there is a direction, it doesn't mean that it caused it. Just because someone goes and shoots up a school and they happen to play Call of Duty, it doesn't mean that Call of Duty caused that to happen. So you can't imply causation in that way. So thus he refutes Anderson. And they've been going back and forth for a while. Anderson's been writing this stuff since the 80s. And Ferguson has come in the 2000s to kind of counterbalance it. So that's kind of a summary of the violent video game debate that's going on. For gamer stereotypes, hopefully this isn't too surprising for everybody out there, but females comprise 47% of the gaming population. Yeah. We're in that house, we're going for parity. And the average age of somebody who buys a video game is 35. The average age of a gamer is 30. We are not, little boys with acne problems living in our parents' basements playing video games by ourselves. I think that's a lot of the misconceptions that's out there. Or you're 30-something living in your parents' basement by yourself. It kind of goes both ways. So there's just a lot of information out there that just isn't true. And part of dealing with mental health is getting rid of that stigma, getting rid of the thoughts that video games are for children, or they're useless, or they're a waste of time, or they're bad for you, or they're dangerous. So just kind of getting to know who's buying games. And this actually comes from the ESA's Essential Facts About Video Games. And I highly recommend that. They put it out every single year. So if you want some really good facts about who's playing and what they're playing, this is really the place to go. So again, what we did, this research is from my dissertation that I'm currently working on. And so the method is just kind of how we all put it together, and we'll get to why this is really important, because I don't want anybody's eyes to glass over quite yet. I know when I see dissertation method, I'm like, oh my god. But I promise it's worth it, so just hang with me. Alright, so step one was we recruited real gamers. And that may sound stupid, but I promise you it's very important, and you'd be very surprised about some of these studies that are put out and who their gamers are. So for our study, we actually went to gaming websites and actually recruited real gamers. So we went to Rooster Teeth. Anybody a Rooster Teeth fan? Went to Griffball Hub. And the PMS clan, because we wanted to make sure that the lead, yeah, there we go, one right there. Oh, another one. Yeah, there we go. So we wanted to make sure that the ladies were included as well, because another problem with the literature is that there are either no women or there's like 5. You can't really do any fun stats with 5. So then we collected data. We made people take a really, really long survey that had a lot of information on there about demographics, play habits, play styles, and fun stuff like depression, anxiety, personality, all sorts of fun stuff. And then we waited 30 days, and we did it again. So you got to take this really long survey twice. And oh, I forgot the little raptor icon there. That's another thing that made our study very, very unique. And to date, I think it's the only one to have done this, is that we used raptor data to track how long people played and what they played. And again, I'll get to the significance of that in just a second. And then step 5, we did science. We made lots of shiny graphs and did science. It was fantastic. So just as a quick recap. Get gamers, assess them for mental health symptoms, wait, reassess mental health symptoms, record the hours they played during that 30-day period, and then do science. Science! So what? So what's the big deal? Why do we care about all of this research methodology? Why is it not that interesting? For one, like I said, we have real gamers, and a lot of literature out there, no matter who's writing it, they use a lot of convenience samples. Anybody familiar with that term, convenience samples? We have a couple psychology people in the house? Yeah. So basically what a lot of times they'll do is they'll go to college campuses and say, hey, you're taking Psych 101, you want extra credit? Come take this research study. And do you play video games? No? Well, that's fine. So you're getting people who might have never played or play just console, they're having you figure out PC or vice versa, and you really don't know what their experience is. So are they really gamers, or are they people just being popped into a situation they've never played before? Has anybody played a game that they couldn't figure out the control settings on? Okay, very, very psychological question. How did that make you feel? Yeah, playing Lost Planet, rage face. The controls were awful. So, that's something to keep in consideration. So we used real gamers and we had a natural observation versus a laboratory. Imagine you're sat down to play Grand Theft Auto in a lab with someone like us two leaning over your shoulders and my lab coach with clipboards. Do you think you're going to play? Yeah! Or one really excited, we'll sign him over right away. You're going to play violin? Okay, so you might be doing it to show you think I'm violent. You haven't seen violin yet. So what Raptor allowed us to do is we were able to watch, not really, that would be creepy, but we were able to observe gaming habits, your controller, on your TV, on your schedule, on your console, with your games, and your habits. So we're really observing you in natural habitat, like Steve Irwin, who's out there. Pretty little naughty, don't you? Okay, that was really naughty. So that's another big thing, is that nobody else has ever done that. Because when you collect data like this, you have to be in there, or at least around them. And the average time for playing, can we get a guess? How long do you think gamers were allowed to play in these laboratory settings? Half hour. Half hour? Do I hear high or low? Half hour, 10 minutes to answer. 15 minutes. Yep. About average time, about 15 minutes to let people play. Yeah, how can you play that? If you pull me off a Halo after 15 minutes, I'm going to be a little angry too. My aggression levels are going to be a little high. But I'm not done yet. I've got flood to kill. So that is what is so different about this study, and that's why we really wanted to present on it, because it's real gamers in their real habitats doing what real gamers do, not some abstract sample or some kind of laboratory experiment. So this is what we found.
Okay. So the first question is, are you crazy? That's a valid question.
We want to know.
We want to know. What we found is that pathology actually does not predict actual gaming, which on average in the sample is 2 hours a day. So it may sound like a lot, but if you think about it, people do a lot of things for entertainment 2 hours out of the day, like watch TV. So, when you're looking at this, the green ones are how much, we first ask how much do you expect that you'll be playing per week, and then we look at how much you actually play. And in terms of symptoms of depression, and if you're into this, the BDI, anxiety, if you're into it, the STAI, state anger, STAXI, trait anger, STAXI. Those are the measures if you're into this. What we found is the only thing that really predicts is what you expect to play. And so people who are depressed and people who have a lot of trait anger, that means like enduring over years, they expect to play more, but they don't. So, are you guys crazy? No. The more you play, crazier you are? No. So, there actually isn't any real connection. So it does predict expected gaming. It's what we call a small effect. That's another thing to watch out for in these studies. Sometimes they're like, oh, there's this huge connection. We explained 1% of the variance. Yes. But you can get significance that way. So it's good to identify what are small, medium, and large. And so these are both small effects. So. Oh, one thing to keep in mind, sorry about the last slide. It's important whenever you're looking at the research. There's something we call negative mood state processing bias. People who are constantly depressed or constantly angry don't really see the world accurately. And so if you ask them, what do you do? Or what are you going to do? They don't report accurately. So if you're looking at research that seems to draw a connection between these two things, they may just be, both of the things that they're reporting are coming from the pathology. It's not actual reality. So they say, oh, there's a connection between this and that. No, they're just biased reporting. So we wanted to know if your beliefs about your gaming habits predict whether or not you would game, and we looked at 3 different things. First is, are you playing video games instead of going to a therapist? Are you using video games as a type of therapy? And this isn't something that's totally bizarre. There's something also called retail therapy, where I feel bad and I'm gonna go buy something and I'll feel better. And I know I feel better after a good haircut, so I'm not dismissing this at all. What's the chocolate? The chocolate. Is it other chocolate therapy? So people report they play video games to relieve feelings of anxiety or depression. And then the other ones, socializing. Are you socializing because you think video games are a great way to get to know people? Versus, on the other end of the scale is, video games are one of my main social activities. And there's a difference. One is, you know what, I game and I meet people. It's a great way to do it. That's the positive end of the scale. The negative end of the scale is kind of a sense of, this is my only recourse. And so it kind of makes sense when you think about it. If you think this is the only way I can do it, that might be a negative end of the scale of using things.
Imagine the forever alone meme. That would be this end of the spectrum. That's sad.
So the last one is relaxation versus losing yourself. And so relaxation side is video games relax me. The negative side is I tend to lose track of time when playing video games. And honestly, I do. So I love the fact that Civilization has a timer thing on it where it kicks you out. But the extent of it is what's really important. If this is a moderate level thing, it's not a big deal. But when it gets to be extreme, when you've been sitting there and you wake up and it's hours and hours later, and this is a chronic thing, and you haven't done anything to really get away from that, when you're going in to lose yourself, you want to lose yourself, it's the happiest time of your life, and you're dragged kicking and screaming away from it, that's kind of the negative end of the scale. And so in this, it's kind of the same thing. In terms of expected play, you can see that gaming as treatment, if you're using it as treatment, you want the treatment, you tend to play more. In terms of being social, it's not really it's what we call a trivial effect, and it's in the negative direction. And in terms of relaxing versus losing yourself, if you like to relax playing video games, then you tend to play a lot more. And that is actually the only one connected to whether you actually play more. So the other two, again, they're kind of an illusion. But if you relax to play, then you do actually tend to play more. So gaming causes pathology. So we track people over a month and see how much they game, and then we checked in with them at the very end to see, did you get sicker? Did you get crazier? No. No effect. So, and we had a pretty decent sized sample, so we could have picked up little things. Nothing. So there you go. If you play a shooter, and shooters make all the news and everything, it actually reduced your anxiety. You know, you stress out, you have a bad day, play a shooter, you feel better. Over the month, you're feeling better. So there you go. If you play Civilization or something else other than a shooter, guess what? So your state anger actually went up. State is just the transitory one, not trait. So, and it's still below average. So.
And just for disclaimer, this was collected before SimCity came out. So that does not have an effect on our
Can we actually play SimCity?
We aren't able to answer that question at this time. I need more research.
So in terms of your beliefs and why you're gaming, how those had an influence on things, if you're using them, if you're seeing them at games as a good place to meet people, guess what? It actually reduces your depression. So if you think, you know what, this is another part of my social life, and it's a way that I meet people, it actually works. People talk a lot about the virtual world as if it's fake. That's not necessarily true. The social connections that you make there, and there have been studies that look at people and examine people and show that the way that they respond to people online is actually very similar. And so it can be a good thing. In terms of your state anger, it actually drops it. So, in terms of relaxing or losing yourself, the more you use it for relaxation, guess what? The less anxiety you feel. So that works too. Games as treatment, it doesn't work. So just as a note, if you're trying to reduce your feelings of depression, reduce your feelings of anxiety by using video games, I haven't found it to work. So.
And that's clinical levels, right?
Actually, we're looking at just symptoms overall. So in terms of looking at clinical levels or not, the number of people who play video games who are crazy is not enough for us to really have good power to pick up anything aside from large effects. So there were probably some small effects, but we couldn't claim significance, so we couldn't claim that they were totally different. So this is like symptoms overall. So even if you're just bouncing around at the subclinical level, and maybe you're at risk for further depression. So in a way, it's actually more impressive that we found some things there because there's a floor effect, so we don't really have a whole lot of way to go, but we still did find effects. So in terms of causality, people talk a lot about correlation, not meaning causation. Gaming beliefs were measured before we measured the changes, so it's unlikely that's the reverse. It's unlikely that you kind of look back in time and be like, oh, well, I'm going to change my gaming habits because I got more anxious. So causality probably doesn't run the other direction. People who do worse initially report a concern over how they use games. So if you're using games in a negative fashion, then you are more likely to suffer. So that includes using it for treatment. You can't get games outside of, or sorry, you can't get games outside of friends. You can't get friends outside of games. Or if you're getting involuntarily lost. I mean, these are some pretty bad signs. If you're on the flip side of those scales, that's great. So remember, it is a continuum. And are these beliefs accurate or are they internalized gamophobia? This is something we can't answer. It's a fundamental question here. And so these beliefs tend to lead to better or worse outcomes. Why are those beliefs leading to better or worse outcomes? Is it because these perceptions you have about why you game are accurate? And they are accurate and so they predict further pathology? Or is it internalized gamophobia? So the extent that you game a lot and people say, oh, you just game because you need to get friends, or oh, you just game because you want to escape the world. Is it people wearing down on you? Is it them teaching you to fear yourself, to fear your activities, to look at your behavior and view your behavior as pathology? That's a possibility here and one that we can't rule out. So are you facing a lot of pressure and stress because you game, and that's leading to the negative outcomes? Or is it because you're using games in an unhealthy way, and that's leading to the negative outcomes? We really can't answer that. And with that in mind, as a clinical psychologist, I have to wonder, to what extent would changing your perspectives on your gaming help? If this is what we call a framing issue, how you understand your behavior is what leads to pathology, then is my goal as a clinical psychologist to get you to understand that gaming isn't sick, that if you find friends through gaming, that doesn't make you pathetic, it makes you human, and it's a great thing. So do we need to change the frame? Is that getting lost? If I get lost, but I set, an alarm on my phone or in civilization, I tell it, hey, kick me out at this point. If I manage it in an appropriate way, is that getting lost? Is that really leading to pathology? Or is it when I tell people I get lost and they go, oh, wow, you get lost. What kind of maniac are you? Is that what's leading to the problem? We don't really know. So, likewise, to what extent would changing gaming versus non-gaming behavior help? So do we need to use this research to encourage people to seek other social outlets, to use the gaming as a different social outlet? Do we need to basically do the set the time thing? It's like if you get lost, it's a problem. Okay, we'll set a little stopwatch. When the alarm goes off, then you have to stop. Is that what we need to do? So this research has answered a lot of questions, but it's also raised a lot of interesting ones. So, conclusions for gamers, for all of you who are gamers. You're not crazy. There we go. That's good news. The bad news is what it really is saying is you're not crazier than everyone else, just because you're a gamer. Also, playing games will not make you crazy all by themselves. So don't look at the number of hours that you play and think, oh, this is going to drive me mad. That's not necessarily true. It's the way that you use them, we think. They can be a great place to find friends if it's your only way. And it may just be if it's your perception that's your only way, but that's kind of going off into a tangent. But if it's your only way, that might be a problem. So, because the people strongly endorse that it was their main way. They can be a great way to relax. I know I use it this way all the time. If you're getting lost, that might be a sign that something might be going wrong. So if you are getting lost, have someone help you out with that. Set some sort of thing like an alarm clock. Most importantly though, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a clinical psychologist, they do not replace therapy. If you need help, you should get it. So, and actually, we do other research on clinical efficacy, and in terms of talk therapy, it's actually been shown to be better and more long-lasting than drugs. So finding someone, and there was a great presentation the other day by a gaming affirmative therapist, but finding someone that you can talk to about any issues or feelings that you might have can actually help a great deal. So, if you are a designer, are there any designers in here? Yay! Some designers. We don't know if you're not crazy or not. So just so you know, your consumers aren't crazy and what you're doing isn't driving them crazy. So that might be a little bit of a load off. People do buy your games to meet these needs. So that's something important to keep in mind. The extent that you can address these needs would be fantastic. Such as getting lost, facilitating positive socialization. And I know I've been playing games for a couple of decades now, I have to admit. And I have seen the social aspect just blossom. And it's been fantastic. I think from a mental health perspective, but also I think the extent that people meet this in a positive way really kind of encourages sales, let's be honest. So, are there treatment-oriented games? This is actually a developing field, and it's a niche market. There actually aren't that many crazy gamers out there. But treatment-oriented games I think are very promising in the future, and I know Kelli has a lot of great ideas along those lines.
No, there's a lot of really great games out there. I know there's one, I think it's being developed in Sweden, that does CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy for children. And you're a pirate ship and it shoots automatic thoughts out of a cannon and you have to snatch out the bad thoughts and leave the good thoughts there. So that's one of the ones that are out there. Jane McGonigal, if anybody's familiar with her, she's got a ton of games from changing the world through oil, environmental things, as far as mental health. I actually work with veterans in the VA in Washington, D.C., and I've implemented game theory to help my veterans do their homework. We call it weekly challenges, and they level up, and it's really cool, and they really enjoy it. But there is kind of a problem right now where a lot of game developers don't want to create, I think what's that horrible word they call it, educational? No, not educational. There's a term for it. Edutainment, thank you. So games that are just about, that kind of thing. But, I mean, everybody remembers Oregon Trail, right? Yeah. Everybody remembers the Big Blue River. I know, I suck their head. So, I mean, there are games out there that are a model, and I think if, on these two sides, the educational side, the mental health side, and the gaming side, they really need to get together and have a conversation. Because a lot of educational sides, they just want it to be a straight educational game, which is great, but that's not what gamers necessarily want. There's that gaming aspect that has to be prevalent for people to want to play it. I mean, number crunchers is great, but after a while it gets a little old, especially after you learn your times tables. So, it is a niche market, and it is growing. So if you have any good ideas, make sure that you go to a developer and let them know. And through a developer, we have a Ph.D. squared and a hopefully soon PsyD here that would be lovely to talk to you. Loving it. So just throwing that out there. So we're going to have the Q&A section. We have some people, our lovely enforcers here, have the microphone, and they're going to pass it around so that nobody trips and falls, just like that.
Do you think that a month was a long enough segment of time to really gauge whether the mental health had changed?
I would have liked to go longer. I would have loved to do it in like 30-day intervals over a longer period of time. However, it's a dissertation, and I want to graduate sometime in the near future. So it's kind of one of those things where I think it gives a lot of really good information, especially considering all the unique aspects, the raptor tracking powers, the observational, the non-convenience data, using real gamers. And I think it's really set me up for future research to dig into exactly that question.
And it was 15 minutes in a typical experiment versus a month. So, and we did look at things 6 months later. We didn't look at pathology, but we did look at gaming 6 months later, and it was actually remarkably consistent.
There's a lot of debate going on right now about guns. And I heard a show on NPR the other day where this guy made a lot of sense, I thought, where people say guns don't kill people. But he did make the point that it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
And so I'm just asking if you're doing any research about video games in that light, because you're talking about people either using them this way or using them that way or whatever, but maybe people could use some information or some help because maybe they make it a lot easier to do some of those things.
Sure, and then there's two main points on it. It's a great question. There's two main points. One, just because you play Halo or Call of Duty does not mean you have any clue how to load or handle a gun. I mean, if you've never handled a weapon, if you've never received any kind of training from either a family member, a sibling, or anything like that, I can guarantee you, I've done weapons training. I had no idea how to do anything with it, other than,
Talking about the connection between video games and guns, although I know that's a whole other topic.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
I was just talking about the connection between video games and mental health, like if video games make it easier to lose yourself, make it easier to, some of those things you were saying that weren't healthy.
Okay.
You know what I mean? The whole thing with video games and guns is like a whole other.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I was just, you know what I mean? I was just drawing the analogy.
Yeah.
So.
In a lot of media, actually, when she was responding to that, in a lot of media, it talks about it in terms of behavioral facilitation, meaning it kind of teaches you and trains you and models for you the proper behaviors, and as she's pointed out, the real behaviors involved actually don't really match up with video games very well. So in terms of it training you to carry out these acts, but not a great trainer. I mean, the Army uses trainers that are far superior. But in terms of the mental health aspect, we didn't see any changes at all in trade anger, and the state anger changes actually came from the more benign non-shooter, well, what they consider benign, non-shooter games, and it was just state anger. And an important thing to keep in mind is even though we saw increases, it was still far below the average person. So I have been walking around this conference, y'all are very nice. So it's not, I also go
Dachi, and he actually ran a study to see whether it was, like in video games and mental health, it was actually competition and not the violence of the video game that predicted whether people would experience anger and hostility and those more negative emotions. And he did find that it was competition, not the game itself, which I think is a great example with in real life football.
Yeah, I was curious about the data that you had in the beginning in the introduction, how you operationalized the term gamer, and more on that. How is a gamer usually, how does the term gamer usually defined in studies? Because there's a huge difference, in my opinion, between someone who plays, who you call a hardcore gamer, or someone who's played Bejeweled Blitz 3 times, right? You could call them both gamers, but I think that makes a huge difference. I'm wondering how people tend to operationalize and how you guys did in the first set of data.
Well, in the literature, they're often referred to as people who play video games. So that's how they operationalize it. Have you played Bejeweled once, or are you an MLG player? They don't typically break down. Some studies do. I don't want to knock everybody. But a lot of the times it's just, subject engaged in video game play, therefore it made them a video gamer. For us, we went to sites that are known for gamers. It's what they do, it's what they live and what they breathe. And we didn't really have to operationalize it so much because we really looked at the hours they play. And that's kind of, we look to see, is there consistency, or did you just play 1 hour in the last month? And that wasn't highly impressive. But everybody was pretty, 2 hours a day was average, right?
Yeah, and we actually wanted people who didn't play a lot because, in order to make a comparison, we need the people who, may have been contacted through these means, but actually don't really play a whole lot. And we needed people who played, and I think there were something like 200 hours or so in a month. We needed those people. We needed the whole range.
Quick question, well, two-part questions. For your Raptor program, did it cover data from, say, consoles to tablets to phones, like being here at PAXeast or DS? And did it cover deviations for, like, us military who go TDY, or the week long I'm here, I'm obviously on my console, so did it cover deviations for those?
It didn't cover tablet or mobile because Raptor just can't cover that. It can cover PS3. I think it covered 360 definitely, computer, because that's a big one too. And maybe DS, I'm not sure if it was Wi-Fi connected, but as far as mobile and tablet, Raptor doesn't have that capability. Not that I was made aware of anyway. And as far as being deployed or TUI, if you could log in on your gamer tag or PSN ID, then it would track you. But if you weren't using that, then there was no way for us to be able to log those hours. So it's not perfect by any means. I mean, we're not saying that this is the answer, but it is just a different take on it because you're not in the lab.
With the games you played, was it more focused on multiplayer as opposed to single player? I personally feel like single player games tend to be a little more calming. The multiplayer gets you a lot more amped up, working with people, being competitive.
The tough thing about that is when someone reported that they played Halo, I have no idea whether they're in multiplayer, if they're in campaign, if they're in Forge. So we couldn't really look at that. So even if you have a game like Halo where you can play single, you can do campaign solo legendary if you're suicidal and you wanted to do that. But versus something like Fallout 3, which is just a single player game. So we couldn't really break that down necessarily because you can't tell what people are playing when you're playing a game that has the multiplayer option on it. We did do something.
We did look at it a little bit, but we didn't see any effects.
Thanks.
It was like we're disappointing them because we didn't find anything bad.
You guys just aren't crazy enough.
So this one's a really quick one, but I'm sure you have the answer for. You said you had a great data pool. How big was your data pool?
Let's see. For time 1, it was 365, and time 2, it was close to 100.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was awesome that you used Raptor with your study, and my question is, what statistical data did they use prior to that, as far as when they say that playing games made people violent? Did they know how long people played, or did they just throw that up in the air and let it run?
Well, they would ask for self-report. How many hours a day do you think you play? Which, as we've shown, is not a reliable way to assess how long somebody actually played. And they just do a lot of self-report. How much do you play? What do you play? That kind of thing. And then for the aggression, they have questionnaires that they would administer them to people immediately after about 15 to 30 minutes after they played the violent game. And that's how they assessed for regression. So yeah, it's not very comforting, is it?
No, that's not.
No, it's not. I think we're at this time. So, but just remember, we'll hang around here, and I just want to thank everybody for coming.